Please support the official release. Buy comics. What's up, YouTube? It's me, Super Moon Mario Comics, and I'm here to bring you today the first of many summaries of the Walking Dead comic book series. This is going to be Days Gone By, the first volume, part 1. So this comic starts off with a cop named Rick Grimes, who is with his best friend Shane, and they're trying to stop an escaped prisoner at a standoff. So then Rick, trying to get Shane to cover him, and he's going to head over to a hole to get a vantage point. He's going to head into a ditch, and what ends up happening is that he gets shot. So then fast forward later, and Rick wakes up in a hospital, and he has no idea what's going on. He then yells out for a nurse and wonders where the help is. He ends up pulling out his IV and heads out of his room looking through the hospital to see where everybody is, and he sees a zombie. Now, of course, Rick has no idea what that is because he's been in a coma for this entire zombie outbreak. So eventually Rick does leave the hospital, and outside he sees a zombie up close and personal for the first time, and this frightens him to the point that he runs away on a bicycle nearby. He then goes searching through houses, including his own, trying to find where his wife and his son is, and he doesn't know where they are. And he then gets hit over the head by a boy named Dwayne. And then his father, who's named Morgan, comes out telling Dwayne that the person he hit was not in fact a zombie, but was a real person. Rick then wakes up and he basically talks with Morgan and Dwayne, and basically what happens is that Morgan explains to Rick that over the last week about the zombie outbreak and how people moved out to the city. And so Rick tells Morgan that they should head over to the police station that he has keys to. Once at the police station, Rick is able to stock up on guns and supplies, ammo, and get his own vehicle. He even gives Morgan his own set of guns and a car for himself. The comic then ends with Rick driving to the same spot where he saw the first zombie, and he ends up shooting it in the head out of mercy, and continues on his path towards Atlanta. And that ends the first issue. Issue 2 starts off with Rick finally arriving in Georgia and him not being able to get a gas pump working. He then leaves the gas station and he eventually ends up running out of gas. He then goes into a nearby house wondering if there's anyone there that can actually lend him some gasoline, and he goes and discovers that everybody in the house is actually dead. He then goes outside behind the house where he finds a barn with a horse in it that looks perfectly healthy, so he decides to take the rest of his adventure into Atlanta on horseback. He then finally arrives in Atlanta, Georgia, and finds it has been overrun with zombies. His horse then gets surrounded by zombies, and he has to figure out something to do fast. So once he's off his horse, he starts shooting the zombies and killing them and attacking them while his horse goes down, and eventually he starts to run down an alley where he is grabbed by this man that's there. The man that's there tells Rick to follow him if he wants to basically live, and he tells Rick to stop using his gun because it's going to attract too much noise. Once they get away from the big crowd of Atlanta, Georgia, the man leads Rick down a back alley towards the woods where it's safe, and he's basically asking Rick what's he doing there, and Rick explains that he's been in a coma for the last month, and so he has no idea what's going on. The man then explains that the government did in fact try to hoard people towards cities, but the plan did not end up working because when a zombie bites another person, that person turns into a zombie, so it became a giant feeding ground for the infected rather than a safe haven, and so a lot of people ended up dying. Now, Rick had gone to Atlanta, Georgia in the first place to find his wife and son because he has in-laws that live there, and he believed that his wife would have taken his son there if any trouble happened. So then Rick basically is very sad and distraught, believing that his wife and his son are dead. But the man who's there, who we later found to be named Glenn basically tells him that he's bringing Rick to a camp that he belongs to. It is there at that camp that Rick finds his wife Lori and his son Carl, and he embraces them, and that's when issue 2 ends. Issue 3 starts right where issue 2 left off, with Rick still embracing his son and his wife. He's then greeted by his best friend Shane, and he learns that when the outbreak started, Shane helped get Carl and Lori to safety, and Rick thanks Shane immensely. Shane then goes around introducing Rick to everybody within the camp, to Alan, to Jim, to Dale, to Carol, and Sophia, and mentions he has a wife named Donna and a set of twins named Billy and Ben. Of course, I'm talking about Alan. Rick is then introduced to Amy and her sister Andrea, and then officially sees Donna and the twins, and Shane introduces Rick as Lori's husband. So that night, Rick is basically talking with his wife about what happened and saying that he can't sleep and that he's glad that he's finally found Lori and Carl, and Lori is feeling very guilty over the fact that she had to leave Rick in the hospital, believing that he would be safe there due to the fact that there should have been government assistance in hospitals and there would have been tighter security there, obviously. But she still felt that guilt about leaving her husband behind. And Rick basically says he understands, he knows that she's been through a lot and that she had to protect Carl, and that in the same situation, he would have done the same thing. So the next morning, Shane actually invites Rick to go out hunting with him, and Rick goes out to take a shower in Dale's camper. After Rick is done taking his shower, Dale says, he asks if he's Lori's husband, and Rick says yes. And Rick says that Shane is a good man, and Lori is also a good person because he'd actually heard her talk about Rick a lot and for a long time. But he warns Rick, saying that Shane does not like the fact that you're back due to the fact that he's had his eyes on your wife for a very long time. And Rick basically shoos his worries aside, saying that Rick is a friend and that he's my friend, and the reason why he has his eyes on Lori is because he is just watching out for her. And Dale warns him that he wouldn't himself trust Shane around his wife, and Rick says he'll keep that in mind. Rick then sees Shane and Lori casually having a conversation and thinks that Dale is crazy and that there's no way that Shane would actually try and make advances on Lori. And then Rick gives Lori some of his clothes so that she can go and wash them. So then Carol, Donna, and Lori take their own family's respective set of clothes and they bring them down to a river to wash them. So then Shane talks to Rick while they're hunting about how he had to steal some supplies and that he wonders whether their captain will have anything to say when they eventually get back to town. And Rick is saying that the town is gone the way they knew it, and so that they won't have to worry about the captain. And Shane still has some hope that they'll be able to return to the town eventually. And then they shift their conversation to Glenn, in which they wonder why someone would routinely go out of their way to get stuff like candy bars and toilet paper and detergent for people on a daily basis, and about how dangerous it is. And Shane says that Glenn has a sort of talent for being able to get past the zombies without being caught. The comic then shifts back to the women, in which they have finally finished washing their clothes and they're heading back to camp. And this comes right after Lori explains the story about how her and Rick met and got into a relationship, in which she learned certain side details like the fact that Rick had a brother named Jeff, and that Lori is actually 2 years older than Rick and met him at a New Year's Eve party. But on the way back, the women are actually attacked by a zombie, and Alan gets up to defend his wife, but Donna freezes and she can't move due to the fear of the zombie, and Alan's trying to shoot it, but he can't because Donna is in the way. The zombie is then chopped off, his head is chopped off by Dale, who explains that he was just cutting some firewood and he heard the screaming until he came to see what was happening, and he saved Donna's life. And then the kids run towards their moms, Carl towards Lori and Sophia towards Carol. Rick and Shane then see a zombie who's eating a deer, and they both decide that the zombie has too much potential diseases, so they would have better luck of not eating the deer at all. And so they look at the zombie and examine for the first time what it really looks like and how it acts, because the first time they're seeing them without it actually attacking them right off the bat, or they attacking it. So then once it notices them, Rick decides to kill it flat out, not giving it a chance to actually attack them. And then they hear a gunshot and decide the camp is in danger, so they run towards back to camp. When Rick arrives at camp, he immediately goes to Lori and tries to figure out what went wrong, and Lori explains to Rick about how a zombie came out of the woods, and that even after they chopped off the zombie's head, how the zombie was still alive, and so they had to shoot it to put it out of its misery. The comic then ends with Rick embracing Lori and saying that he's so glad that she's okay and everything is fine, and then it zooms in at Shane staring very ominously at Rick and Lori, which basically gives the reader merit to what Dale was talking about earlier, that maybe Shane actually does like Lori, and maybe he actually does not like the fact that Rick is back and wants Lori all to himself. So this is where this comic and this video is going to end off. This is part 1 of Days Gone By. I decided to separate the volume summaries into 2 parts so I can put them out faster. So if you like this video, give it a like, give it a thumbs up, and make sure to subscribe. Leave some feedback, and I will leave a link to part 2 when I finish that and uploaded it. Have a great day.